What is it like to work with me, Kirby, and the Two Mind Method? That's a question I've been getting a lot lately, so I figured I'd shoot this video and lay it all out for you. Hi, I am Kirby, the author of the Two Mind Method, and I shoot these videos every day to share what I've learned and experienced along the way, hopefully to help other people navigate through the most difficult times of life and kind of move upward towards joy and freedom, really. Okay, so today we're talking about like my sessions. How does it work? And how does it play out? What does it feel like? Well, first I'll say that like predominantly I work in the one-on-one space and shooting these videos. Those are kind of my two predominant things. But I also teach regular classes here in person and I travel sometimes for that. I do corporate gigs, group work, couples counseling, the whole thing. And in the one-on-one space, which is where most of the people find me, is because they are struggling with some aspect of their life. And there's like, I don't like what's happening. I don't like these emotions. I don't like how I'm feeling. I don't like the way that this relationship fell apart. And this guy looks like he knows what he's talking about. And so they come talk to me and they sign up for a session and then we begin. And sometimes people are a little bit apprehensive about that. And they're like, what is this going to be like? What's going to happen? Like, is this like therapy? Yes, it's a lot like therapy in the sense that we are sitting together chatting. We're talking. I'm asking questions. You're telling me about your life. You're sharing your stories in this space of emotional safety. Now, most of my clients are kind of spread around the world at this point, and so most of those are video calls and kind of through a Zoom-like platform. But it's basically we talk to cameras and we share stories and all that kind of stuff. If you're closer, if you're here in person, I prefer to work in person so we can kind of get all the nonverbal communication styles. We can be present with each other and, you know, gazing eye contact and all that stuff, right? But just a sense of felt safety in the exchange. So that's kind of the logistics of it. What does the actual session feel like? What happens inside there? And glad you asked. One of the keys to my approach is that there is actually not any specific ritualized, regimented approach to how we engage with whatever your struggle is. The way I see it is that there's this overarching framework, which I call the Two Mind Method, which is informs certain knowledge, information about how psychological dynamics work. And there's a whole segment on trauma. There's a whole segment on the two minds, which is conscious and subconscious mind. And that includes their memory systems, how that works. And then there's a whole section on attachment theory and kind of the fundamental workings of what creates a cluster of behavioral responses that we get label as an attachment style, right? Attachment theory is not an assessment of personality disorder or mental instability or anything else. Attachment theory is basically just a framework in which we cluster behavioral responses together. And from that clustering, we can make guesses about their future and their past. Okay, so there's the attachment theory bit, there's the two minds, and then there's the trauma bit. And there's some other stuff sprinkled in there too, like somatic work and other things, but we'll talk about. These are the overarching framework and the collection of interlocking theories that help inform me to give me some guesses about what's actually going on under the hood of whatever is inside your dynamic. But it covers a lot of material and it covers a lot of possible behavioral responses. So how do we get there? And the way we get there is a natural, organic conversation that can simply start as, hi, how are you doing today? And it's like from there, the way you respond, the language you use, your choice of words, the amount of emotional intensity that is communicated with each of those words, kind of the way your physiology is presenting itself, like tension, jitteriness, like apprehension, visible signs of fear or discomfort. I'm watching all these things. And each of those things tells me something about the state of your nervous system, which by kind of extension goes to your subconscious and your attachment system. But those extensions happen because I have the framework inside my mind about how these things connect together. And so we have an organic discussion. It's like, how are you today? What's going on? Like, is there anything that's really kind of hot, uncomfortable, alive? What's the most important thing that's on your mind most recently over the course of the past week or month or whatever, right? And people come in and they'll sit down and they think about it. And usually there's something that is bothering them, something their nervous system is activated. They've got a fear or anxiety that's living inside them. And yet they want to talk. And so we ask and we talk and we ask questions. And over the course of that first 45 minutes or an hour, we're asking a lot of questions to just say, what is it like for you? Like, you've got this situation going on with a romantic partner. And it's like, and I'm asking, is the predominant emotion, would you say it's more anger or fear or resentment or this kind of like just unsettled nature, just this restlessness? See, I'm exploring to say find out which emotions are really popping up to the surface for you. And then that begins to paint a picture about what's going on inside the system. And from there, we're asking, it's like, okay, well, what was it like 3 weeks ago? What was it like 3 years ago? Have you ever been in a different situation with a partner that is kind of like this one? What were the emotions like then? Okay, now we're starting to get this picture of how this romantic relationship is showing up in your life right now in this moment. But then we also ask questions about like, okay, well, what was it like to hang out with your father or your mother? What was your childhood like? Do you remember any of it? Loss of memory is a sign of trauma. And I'm looking for clues. And that's basically the way to think about it, is that our first meeting, our first discussion is like a detective looking for clues. I'm the detective. You are my scene. And I am walking around, exploring, observing, putting pieces together. And just like CSI Miami or the other TV shows of that kind, it's like when you follow this story, you've got kind of that lead investigator, detective person, whatever. They have a greater understanding about what means what, right? In your fancy TV detective drama, the normal person walks into the scene and they just see a broken bottle. But the detective walks in the scene and says, okay, here's a broken bottle. Sure. But there's these glass pieces that are over there. And there's this scrape on the wall over here. And because I have this understanding of the physics of broken bottles and crime scenes in general, I'm going to put these pieces together and I'm going to guess that we're going to walk over to the door and we're going to pick up a shoe and we're going to see a piece of broken glass inside one of the shoes next to the door. And that's what we find. And the normal person, the non-detective, sees that and says like, oh, wow, this person's so amazing. But really that person's just got more knowledge inside their brain and, a lot of very developed models about how these things work together. And that's me. And hopefully, eventually, the students that I teach. So I'm the detective, you're the scene. I am investigating through the scenes of your life, looking for clues and information that will begin to tell me what's going on. What's going on in the sense of like, where do your fears live? What is the things that you're terrified of? What are the things that you're avoiding in life? What are the parts of yourself that you are denying, neglecting, abandoning because you're chasing after some kind of glory high or peak experience or, feelings of euphoric love with another person? And we're looking at romantic relationships. We're looking at what you do in your own time. We're looking at your the degree of comfort you have when you're walking down the street by yourself or engaging with your own hobbies. We're looking at how the feelings that live inside you now in reference to your parents, but then at the same time, we're going back in time and trying to explore different memories that you have with your parents or siblings or caregivers, whatever. All these various bits of data are feeding into the theories and the framework that I have in my mind that tell me cause and effect relationships between attachment dynamics, unresolved trauma, nervous system stress response, stress hormones, brain physiology, nervous system physiology, all of it. These things are all connected. And then when we know that there's certain kind of stresses in childhood, we can predict pretty accurately that there's going to be certain kinds of stresses in adulthood. If we observe certain kinds of stresses and reactivity in adulthood, we can make pretty accurate assumptions or guesses about what kind of stresses this person faced in childhood. And we're going back and forth along this timeline. And we're looking at all these different bits of stress and data and everything else, and we're beginning to form a theory. And the theory might be something like, as a child, you were in a situation where there was uncertainty and chaos around you, and there was this person, your father, that was a great source of emotional desire. You had a craving for connection with this person because he's big and powerful and laughing and fun or whatever. And yet when you went up and approached this person, he shut you down or pushed you away. And in that moment, you feel rejected, abandoned, neglected. And then your nervous system says, I don't ever want to feel that again. And it begins assembling a collection of defensive mechanisms to make sure that you can avoid being in that situation and feeling that way at any point in the future. There's a developed threat response system. Okay, so now we've got a story. We've got an idea about the dynamic here that's going on and where your fear lives and how it relates to early childhood figures. Okay, now we take that and we go test it. And we say, if that's true down there, then it's probably going to be true up here, is that we're going to be in a situation where you're in a romantic relationship with a woman who's not your dad. How is that connected? Well, let's see. Let's look at the traits of this woman that you're in a relationship with. And it's like, does she show certain kind of signs of emotional unavailability? Is she big and strong and powerful? Is she in the sense that she's charismatic and she has agency and power over life? Maybe she's got an awesome job or just extremely confident when she is in front of a crowd. Be like, that's kind of a little bit like Dad was. And emotional availability. It's like, no, she's not there all the time. In fact, you can see clearly that she's got this innate fear of being too intimate, too close, too emotionally exposed. But yet, at surface level stuff, just like, flirting and banter and sex and whatever else, these are easy. So now we're in this place where it's like we're not actually emotionally available for each other, but yet we're doing all this kind of trappings and behaviors of a couple that's together. But are we actually there? Who knows? Let's go explore that idea. So then we explore that idea. So we're developing theories based upon, we observe all the evidence, we develop a theory, we go test the theory, we present the theory, we say, well, if this theory is true, then you might have this kind of thing show up in your relationship. And then oftentimes the person will be like, oh my God, yes, that's totally me. That's literally how I shoot these videos, is I have seen so many chunks of evidence and how they fit together in different ways. And then I create the theory and then we go test the theory with a human being. And that human being says like, oh my God, that's totally me. And that's kind of many of the stories that I share here on this channel and these videos. So now I've identified it, we've developed the theory, we've tested the theory, we've got at least some degree of affirmation, maybe a lot. And so now we say, we understand this is probably what's going on inside the state of your nervous system and your attachment system in this moment, especially at least in relationship to that person. Okay, now what do we do about it? Now we have to develop a treatment plan based upon that information. We have to develop a treatment plan that will help you move closer to a place that you want to be, or away from a place you don't want to be, right? That usually takes the form of I get triggered in these ways, or I sabotage relationships in these ways, or I have these chronic negative emotions that live inside me. And so we develop a treatment plan for that. And we say, well, how do you do that? How do you develop a treatment plan for someone with a wounded dysfunctional attachment system? Well, that's where attachment theory was failing me for the longest time, because it's like, oh, we're going to, you take some tests, you get assessed as a anxious or an avoidant or whatever, and then we have to reach over and grab this workbook and say, oh, this is the way we heal anxious attachment. It's like, no. Underneath the surface there is fear and a nervous system that has miscalibrated responses to certain types of stress and threat. That stress is, sure, it's uncomfortable. Like, getting a haircut wrong sucks. It's not fun. I got to live with this. I got to figure out an answer. Like, I'm embarrassed to be seen like this. So yeah, that's like stress. But for some people, that would create a cyclic, spinning, out of control, flailing chaos of nervous system activation, of fear, of threat responses, major triggers, major crying, major emotional release. I'm a fan of emotional release, so if that's what happens to get you there, then maybe that's a good thing. But still, we'll say that they spin out of control. Okay, well, you're spinning out of control because your nervous system is miscalibrated. It's seeing bad haircut. It's not even seeing bad haircut. It's seeing the social consequences of bad haircut, which is usually going to mean shame, teasing, disconnection, etc. And so inside my nervous system, it observes the negative consequences of a bad haircut, and then I spin out of control because I've got a miscalibrated response to that kind of stress. That's at the base of attachment theory. That's at the base of trauma, really. And so we need to develop a treatment plan that will help rewire your nervous system to process that stress differently. And I've talked about on this channel before a series of visualization exercises. I have mentioned Ideal Parent Figure Protocol, which is the key thing that I will lean upon. And also just mindful presence. I get to be in your presence. I get to hear about these pains. I get to hear about your compulsions or your behavior patterns that you are ashamed of or whatever. And just to be here and say, I'm here with you. And those big emotions don't scare me away. And that there's nothing that's going to happen ever that will make me shame or blame you or even pull away. I'm here with you and I'm not going anywhere unless you want me to. So in that way, the therapeutic relationship becomes a modeling of fearless presence in the face of difficult emotions. And oddly enough, I didn't plan this. I just discovered along the way, that's one of the most powerful tools there is. And now that I think back on it and the books and journals I've read about the therapeutic relationship in general, it's totally there. And, these people know it. They know it. It's understood. But there's a lot of people practicing that want to be in the healing space that they don't really understand that. They don't really understand that fearlessness that you demonstrate, that you embody, unquestioning fearlessness in the face of difficult emotions, is a powerful tool in and of itself. And if you can't model that, it's going to have consequences. So yeah, detective work. We look, we find, we hypothesize, we test, then we develop a treatment plan. And even the treatment plan itself, that's a theory. That's a hypothesis. We don't know. We don't really fully understand the complexity of who you are, and you don't know that either. And so what we do is we begin a process, hypothesize a type of exercises, a series of homework assignments, a series of meditative self-connection. And then we begin. You begin. You begin to do the exercises, do the homework, do the processes, and then you observe how it changes. And then the next time we meet, you come back and report what you found. And then it's like, okay. And I integrate that into the framework that lives inside my mind. And then we'll be like, oh, this information might mean this information might mean that. We don't know yet. We need to test both sides. So we test and we test and we hypothesize, and we test and hypothesize and test. And over time, we begin to zero in through this kind of diffuse network of experiences. We begin to hone in and hone in and hone in on a key something: fear, trauma. It's usually fear or trauma. So we zero in on that, and then we hypothesize treatment for it. And each step of the treatment process is a check, a return, recalibrate, adjust, try again. And we keep trying. And we go around in this loop. Yeah. That's something that comes from my engineering background, that it's just like, you don't know what's going on. So sometimes you just get in the loop and you just say, like, we're going to try, we're going to observe what we see. We're going to learn from that. We're going to hypothesize, we're going to test, and then we're going to try again. And then you just do all 5 of those things over and over again. And each time you go through, you get closer and closer and closer to the real thing. And then eventually it pops and you're just like, oh, that's what's going on. And then there's this whole systematic physiological reaction to that moment when you find it. And you're just like, wow. And then when we found it, we can stop the kind of development loop, the test, hypothesize, test loop, right? We can bring that to a close and just hone in on the one thing that we've actually found, that the physiology has verified that we are close or totally on point. So then once we have there, we say, okay, what is this? It's usually fear. It's usually some kind of unresolved trauma where my nervous system acts out in a very strong, powerful way in response to a stimulus that is kind of disproportionate to it. Like the stimulus might be small, but my nervous system reacts in a huge way. And so we say, okay, there's a fear there. We need to figure out what the fear is. And then we begin rectifying it. We discharge it. We go through the visualization process to retrain the brain to believe that that situation is not worthy of a system-wide response. We have to do 100 lessons that will fall in right alongside that one that says, that is not a big deal. I can survive this. So that's one thing. So we're rectifying fear. For people that have really intense bouts of anxiety or dissociation, we will go through things like somatic work or breathing or various bits of self-connection, anything that's going to help regulate the nervous system and bring it back from the brink of overwhelm. But those are crutches. That's not the treatment. That's just a crutch or a short-term engagement that you utilize, short-term tool that you utilize to bring the nervous system back in the place that we can actually even work together. A lot of people treat co-regulation or numbing or, self-soothing. They treat those as like that's the end goal, and it's not. It's not really at all. Those are just temporary mechanism you use in a moment of crisis. You use those tools to bring that nervous system back to the point where it can actually reliably face stress and overcome stress so that it can learn the lesson that it's like, I am powerful, I have agency, I have capability to invent my own future. So we use those tools to create an opportunity to do the real work. And even those are that's kind of the short-term game. There's a longer-term game that is what I refer to as ideal parent figure protocol. It comes from the book by Daniel Brown. An ideal parent figure protocol is the long game. And so we will be doing these short game exercises to help you work through. There's the shortest game, which is how can I survive this moment of crisis right now? There's we'll say medium game. Medium game is how do we discharge the intensity of fear responses that live inside your system? How do we recalibrate your threat detection system so that it is not activating at a 10 when 3 is a more appropriate response? So how do we recalibrate that? And then the long game is using a long series of visualized ideal parent situations to create a series of memories that live inside my mind so that my attachment system can begin to reorient around these new memories. And in doing so, the fundamental makeup of my emotions and my emotional responses, it begins to change. And that's a long game. That game can last months or years. But usually people feel a pretty meaningful, significant difference within about 2 months. But I always recommend that we do it longer. In fact, I recommend you do it as long as possible. As much as possible, as long as possible, until you wake up one day and you're just like, wow, I'm not anxious anymore. I'm actually pretty chilled with life. I'm happy. I enjoy my life. I'm not really worried about anything. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm not trying to avoid anything. I can just be right here and bliss. Yeah, if you have a morning like that, where you wake up like that, you can drop the exercises. Sure. You've arrived. So that's a general, it's more than a general, that's a very specific outline of what it's like to work with me. And if that resonates with you, please, find my booking link, book a session. It's getting very, very crowded lately ever since this channel kind of took off, but I do my best and I try to be available for you guys and help all the people that need help. So I wish you the best and I believe in you. Peace.